think a preview would be great because I haven't looked at it for a couple weeks now.
I think the highlights for me were like honestly the thing that stuck out to me, even though it was specifically not their focus, was the fact there even was a executive order called Preventing Woke AI in the federal U.S. government. They specifically didn't explicitly comment on that, though they did have sections that were quoting other papers about like prejudice and bias in AIs and how that can impact marginalized groups. I wonder if it's like a political hedging or like funding thing that they didn't criticize the social justice impacts of how the no woke AI bill, I mean executive order, was worded.
I know what you're getting at, but like, what is your question about it? You're curious how it
What?
happened,
So
or
they like mentioned criticisms of how legislation and government orders about prompts can harm marginalized groups. They quoted papers about that. However, they didn't directly criticize the keep woke AI out of the federal government and like executive order at the same time. Like they had like a paragraph, but it was sort of siloed off away from the criticisms of that probably would do it. I'll find the other
it's
parts.
it's it's in five
I
it's in
know, but
five
I'm
one.
explicitly saying that like okay, okay, it is freaky, and maybe we should just read that part. Just if it
Well, yeah. So like, let's. I know you want. I know Avery always wants to get to the most juiciest parts, but let's actually review and set up like what is the paper? What are we talking about here? So, prompt governance on governing technologies governed by natural language. So, does anybody want to read the abstract, or shall I go through it? I know I'm going to make Avery suffer by reading the whole abstract. So, um, I'll hearing nobody, I'm just going to go with it.
I can do a paragraph.
Gender. Okay, you go. Great. Take it off.
Generative artificial intelligence (Gen AI) is increasingly operated by natural language instructions (prompts). Across the pipeline, stakeholders designate various forms of natural language instructions. For example, end-user guidelines, developer specifications to treat system-level instructions, system prompts as accessible prompt-based Gen AI intervention points. Assuming they function.
Yeah, so what does this mean? Like, let's break down what this means. So basically it's talking about Gen AI and natural language processing. Policymakers, regulators have to begin to treat these system level instruction, system prompts as accessible prompt-based AI intervention points, assuming they function as behavior controls. So basically, if we regulate and put pressure on this stuff, then we can feel like we're doing something as policymakers. And this is like the core of this is really about, let's say, the core of this is about explainability and interpretability in a lot of ways. And that's a giant, um, I'm going to cite, I'm going to cite my experience in I don't know that it's active. I haven't been there in a couple of years, but I was literally at the MIT Explainability and Interpretability Club reading thing on campus at the time. And like I was at the like I've been between MIT, between Oxford Internet Institute, between UC San Diego, between all the stuff here in Boston and Harvard and Northeastern and Boston University, like it's still a big problem. And I'm saying that I think we in the room know that, but just to emphasize, there is a definite lack, like a major issue in governance in and of itself right now is what this is getting at, and that is we can only legislate or make policy around things that we or understand or explainable or have a certain amount of transparency. And even that is an inherent limit to what we can do. So like that's not like a trivial oh, we'll figure this out in a couple very shortly because we may not. And I think that's also as a slight aside, for a lot of the folks that are basically saying oh, in 2 or 3 years everything's going to be figured out. Like that I think the impending AI singularity, um, it's the only thing that matters is what you do in the next 2 years because eventually it's going to be all figured out by AI. I feel like that really bumps up against things like explainability and interpretability, or if you're dealing with hardware, or if you're dealing with like biological interfacing. Like when you're dealing with things that aren't amazingly easy to be in information complete situations or um and by information complete I mean situations where everything's really explicitly understood already, like all the boards on the chess, all the pieces and all of the moves that you can make on a chessboard are finite and understood. That's why it's so much easier to do that kind of work than, okay, explainability and interpretability is sort of this inherent um bottleneck to doing downstream and downstream things of that in general. So, to continue the abstract, thank you for reading, Avery. Towards this, so what are they getting at, and what are they trying to do with their uh, paper? We evaluate systematically how researchers discuss and treat system-level instructions in existing literature, um, as they isolate language effects, how policymakers and system-level instructions as governance objects incorporating analysis of two recent policy frameworks. So they're looking at these two um, recent frameworks and how policies position system-level instructions within them. uh, these two frameworks. And thirdly, whether misalignments between these perspectives warrants closer inspection regarding the viability of governing through AI use of natural language. This is the classic, let's propose a a question that we, you know, this is posed as a question, but it's sort of what they're really getting at, let's say. We've identified, and so if they close the abstract by saying we've identified a fragmented literature advancing varying and contradictory claims about what system levels instructions can achieve, which distill a typology, keyword, of claims. Further, we show how divergent claims complicate policy approaches that treat system level instructions as stable, interpretable control mechanisms. We show how divergent claims complicate policy approaches that treat systems level instruction as stable interpretable control mechanisms. So what does this kind of mean to say a bit more? Um, Treating these system level instructables as interpretable and perhaps very well explained, very well understood, and we can interpret them very clearly, maybe isn't is a false it's a false is a misguided approach because maybe they can't be as interpretable as we would hope them to be, especially when passing, let's say, federal law or policy around such. So they argue, given such misalignments, careful consideration must be given to prompt governance approaches. Our findings have broad implications, extending from immediate policy to the use of this as a control mechanism in technical systems more generally. So, thoughts or comments or things that come up after the abstract. Right. And and why go on. Yeah, and like this is why there's sort of the evolution of RAGs, like retrieval. I forget what they actually stand for. Let's find out. Which are essentially basing the response off of a set. Like, let's say reference this PDF in my response. Like that's been a very common workaround of this, but like to go to the core of the question, which is why won't um why won't a really great prompt hold? Um, is because of the nature of like a core thing that we've talked about in many things, and that it goes back to Molly's. I love to cite Molly on the can a model that produces a statistically generated output, in this case natural language, in this case a string of language text, whatever, or other things, but let's say language specifically, can that ever be seen as honest? Like how can you attribute honesty to that? at a particular level. That's one way to approach it. But also like at the level of trying to assess, and I really think uh like I'm gonna highlight this because I think I really like this approach, let's say. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna try to change this. There we go. So we can do this. Um what we're dealing with is it like the whole nature of what we're asking it to do. You're not like this is a bit deep in the weeds and slightly computational and historical. In olden times, there were things like expert systems and symbolic logic and different approaches that were much more rigid in the structure of inputs and outputs. In olden times, getting a specific output was seen as desirable for certain things. And this is even going back like I think I always say this and I forget if I said it here. Um like what like this even like going back to 1966, like we've had things since then that this was a early natural language processing computer program that was based off of, I think it was Adlerian psychology, or I guess Rogerian school of psychology. But like it was basically trained on these things from these like prompts and questions and ways of asking, is something troubling you? Men are all like, what's this connection, do you suppose? Like, can you think of a way specific example? Blah 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 blah. He says I'm depressed much of the time. I'm sorry to hear that you're depressed. Like this is stuff that was existing for like well over like 50 years. So point being, to come back, what we're asking current AI to do is to generate non-uniform text specifically. And I think that's sort of the core why I'm kind of trying to maybe diluted my point a little bit with this historical context attempt. But we're trying to make system prompts this fixed thing with a fixed meaning that, okay, this prompt means something very specific, and we're asking a inherently generative, probabilistically, statistically non-uniform output. We're asking something to be made that is inherently not going to be the same every time, unless we really 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 ask it, but then it might change eventually later too. uh, there's an inherent contradiction and tension between that. And I think that's incredibly core to what we're doing. And my final point before all of that is actually I'll do it here. We just covered this other paper in Cognition Futures Reading Group about the topological constraints and self-organization and interacting systems. And without getting in this paper, is basically saying um, there's limitations to the context windows that existing models of LLMs can understand. As in, by nature of everything being flattened into like the way sessions are designed and the way context windows are, this paper is suggesting there's a topological, like mathematical informational topological, the way the structure of information, the way the structure of things are in terms of doing the computing, limit to having a meaningful way to have a consistent uh, persona or a consistent way of the model engaging at all because of actual technological limits too. So to kind of recenter this in terms of like two big questions that are in the background of all this, explainability and interpretability, and then specifically this issue of, okay, we're trying to find some governable piece of legislature, uh, fodder for legislation that is a system prompt that we're hoping is static and reliably influencing the output, while we're using a technology that is inherently probabilistic, inherently generative, inherently not supposed to be uniform in its output. Maybe for like the right answer to a math problem, or a specific structured output within a very specific structured um symmetrical like information complete arena that it can respond to. But when it comes to text specifically, we're largely asking it to be generative on purpose. So that tension, and then also other technical limits on how to do that as well in terms of the topology and everything else. So this is huge, big, broad contexting that I'm doing, but I think it's important to kind of see that as like what we're dealing with. Um, so Avery, you wanted to say some other things about this, I'm sure. Maybe, but also like when you're writing a academic paper like this, you have to stick to your claim. Like like the unit of a paper is limited in what it can do. They may have appendices or other work where they do moral criticism and normative criticism about it. But like this paper is essentially investigating the technical merits of can we actually treat um can we treat is it viable at all to take a piece of the system prompt and make legislation based off of it when we're trying to act like it's totally interpretable and interpretable is their language, but like, is it something we can really build reasonable things around? So their goal in what they're doing in the paper, at least as far as I understand it, is about looking at that. They're mentioning the woke AI stuff, but they're not. The paper isn't about normatively evaluating legislation. The paper's about the technical and policy implications. Which is a good question, but, like, that's why, yeah. Anything else people wanna say about the paper before we kind of drift to the other topics that we mentioned? We'll
From what
probably
I
do it
gather,
more tomorrow. Oh, go ahead, yeah.
from what I gather from the paper, it is sort of like you say. It's criticizing the fact that people want to govern the prompts, but the prompts are not governable such that they are interpretable by the models using them in different ways and are not guaranteed to produce the same output.
Yeah, and I I kind of see it another way to say all of this, which is maybe what Oka was getting at too, is sort of like what to put it in almost too simplistic terms, it's sort of this wishing and hoping that if we can just manage the system prompts, then maybe we're doing something. Maybe we're having some impact on this. And it's like the paper's sort of questioning, well, are you, or is that just fanciful because we really haven't actually maybe they're not as interpretable or maybe it's not as reasonable a lever or an action point as we hope it to be. Right, and that's it. That's like to me, that's like, and we can wrap up by looking at like I don't know what this considerations part is. Ooh, socio-technical implications. Um, this this is maybe like I don't know. We could spend a lot of time here, but I think this will be something we talk about with Molly tomorrow too. I always like socio-technical imaginaries, implications, whatever, all the different things that come after that. Um, I would imagine if I don't know if the authors say this here, because I haven't gotten to this part of the paper. I'm going to read it more ahead of tomorrow. I would imagine the authors would agree with what Avery said about like it's incredibly popular right now to have LLMs do everything. LLMs help this and so on, and there's a number of things that have um we've in other groups and programs, we're discussing a lot about the economics, the sort of ethics washing of it all, the trying to appear a certain way. There's a paper we're looking at. I forget if we mentioned this last time, but the this is we're going to go deeply into this paper ahead, and it's really cool. Reckoning the political economy of AI, avoiding decoys in pursuit of accountability, is a paper that we're taking a deep dive into in another program, and a lot of folks are looking at what can we really measure to understand what's happening in someone like the big tech and frontier labs. uh, at many levels and so on. So that's a cool paper to look at. Maybe talk about that more next time too. But very quickly, I'm just gonna go through this and then you guys can decide what happens next. So their limitations are what? We did a systematic review and it provides some insight, but despite this, there are things that we didn't quite get. Well, we didn't analyze claim development over time. We still identified considerable category convergence. So they're saying they could do more longitudinal, more across time stuff. Yeah. And also, there's stuff that we didn't quite do. Further work could undertake empirical analysis of contested claims in specific government relevant settings, and examine real world operation practice to characterize the gaps between policy and deployed realities. So they're saying, and this is basically, if you're looking at specific niches or domains, there may be even more detailed things than their very broad analysis. And their conclusion is that these system level instructions have been a intervention for Gen AI systems at a governance level because the systems level prompts and whatever are at least legible, editable, and appear. I'm gonna I'm gonna I'm gonna do this because I want to appear to offer direct leverage over model behavior. Yet our systematic review shows fragmented research landscape advancing divergent and sometimes contradictory claims about what these instructions can do, what systems, what reliability. Our policy analysis similarly indicates that emerging governance instruments treat prompts as artifacts that can support these things. But this is not consistently supported by evidence. And then they say our findings demonstrate that governing Gen AI by natural language should be approached cautiously. Writing rules that govern machines requires different approaches than writing rules that govern humans. And I think that's a very fine point to put at the end of their essay paper.